Hey there, welcome to Cricket's Campfire, where today we'll be talking about one of the most ambitious group writing projects you may not have heard about, the SCP Foundation Wiki. We'll be going over what it is and about legal battles they've been fighting. Lastly, we'll be doing a reading from one corner of the site to see if I can convince you guys to head over and take a look. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the SCP Foundation, or as some people know it as, Secure, Contain, Protect, it's a writing project centered around a fictional organization that houses anomalous objects and creatures with the end goal of keeping humanity safe from them. These objects range from a living paper crane and a gun that shoots lunch to things that could destroy the world or the universe itself. Founded about 13 years ago, this project is a Wikipedia-style website that basically means anybody can contribute to it, featuring thousands of entries detailing anomalies and stories about the organization itself. Each object has a containment protocol, which is how the organization plans to secure the object, a description of the item and its abilities, and most often includes other interesting bits of information, like how it was found or experiment logs, and yes, sometimes those are on live people. Written by a large and dedicated community, its unique flair has made it popular to adapt to other media, like video games. I bumped into SCP through Reddit when it was created. I had gone through a few of the original pages of it, and then found a few articles that were simply not interesting to me at the time. It's funny because I actually moved on from that site, completely forgot about it, until my 11-year-old brought it back up to me. He's been very excited about everything SCP, and he's even been playing the games. He's introduced me to a couple of them as well. Now, why are we introducing SCP? What's going on here? We're going to talk about their current problem. I'd like to put a disclaimer first. I am not a lawyer. This information is publicly available, and I'm only sharing what I've read. There may be specific updates that we do not have included here. We did as much research as we can. The current Master Administrator, as of 2020, John Beatty, is leading the charge through some legal battles that have embroiled the SCP Foundation. A Russian individual created a trademark with the EU for the Russian branch of the SCP site, and they have been battling that trademark since at least May 2019. This is as of November 2020 is when we found this information. This individual did not write these stories. He did not contribute to these stories, as far as we can tell. He's completely out of the blue claiming he owns the trademark to SCP in Russia. All of these articles were written by hundreds of independent authors. He's claiming all their hard work as his intellectual property. They're not fighting this battle alone, though. The community came together to fund the lawyers and the court costs, with a few notable signal boosts from some online creators, such as YouTube star Markiplier. Their GoFundMe campaign reached and tripled their initial estimates for the cost of the lawsuit. From the GoFundMe page itself, SCP has updated the anxiously waiting community with, and I quote, "The Russian Federal Anti-Monopoly Service has ruled that Duxin violated fair competition laws by using the trademark against Russian social media groups and their content creators. One content creator in particular was deemed to be owed unspecified monetary damages from the losses Duxin's actions caused them." This is good news, but the fight isn't over, as the committee elected to not rule over the registration of the trademark. This means the next step for the SCP is to lodge a copyright infringement lawsuit, which I presume is in progress based on the language here. News on that front is slow, but generally speaking, the legal system moves slowly, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, so it makes sense that we haven't seen a whole lot of updates. Unfortunately, it appears copyright trolls will try and capitalize on even GPL or Creative Commons property. Those are properties that you can share alike as long as you contribute the original author. And I'm sure they've done this before. I'm sure they're going to continue to do so. It's just an annoying, petty part of humanity that we continue to chase after currency. But enough about all of that. On to the piece I'd like to feature. This story comes from the SCP Foundation Tales section, and it's titled Ethics Committee Orientation. It's by a user going by the name of Voct, V-O-C-T. You can visit the direct wiki page. I'll have it linked down in the description below of this podcast. Brace yourselves, you're going in for orientation. Ethics Committee Orientation. Good afternoon, Doctor. Sit down. Your schedule has been cleared. Do not attempt to leave the room until you are told that this session is over. The door is already locked, but it is crucial you pay attention. Good. You are now part of the SCP Foundation's Ethics Committee. This is not a demotion. Sit down. Yes, you're terrified. You think you're being punished for some failure, some lapse of judgment, some horrible disaster that you were involved with. You think that your career with the Foundation is over. You might have even thought that transfer to the Ethics Committee is a euphemism for killed. This is not the case. You'll notice I said killed instead of terminated. That's a deliberate choice. On the Ethics Committee, we don't use euphemisms. Because of the work that the SCP Foundation does, a lot of personnel think that the idea of the Foundation having an Ethics Committee is just a bad joke. Or they know that the committee exists, but they've got the impression that we're an ineffectual laughingstock. A bunch of purposeless seat fillers who have a rubber stamp that says approved, and never dare to voice an objection. Yes, I see you've heard the jokes. Here's one. How many members of the Ethics Committee does it take to change a light bulb? None! The Ethics Committee can't change anything! No, it's alright. You're meant to laugh. We make an effort to sustain the impression that we're useless because we are the secret power within the SCP Foundation. Sit down. Yes, there are the O5s. They judge what is and isn't safe, and that's a vital important function. But we are the ones who advise the O5s on what is and is not acceptable. You've done horrible, awful things while working for the Foundation. Don't try to deny it, Doctor. We've all done horrible things while working for the Foundation. This is one of the unavoidable consequences of working with SCPs. And, on occasion, you've wondered if we are the, quote-unquote, bad guys. Well, we're not. And that's because of the Ethics Committee. This is your first lesson. Do you understand? Remember this, the Foundation is not evil. We do not torture people just because. We are against unnecessary cruelty. Which means somebody has to decide when cruelty is necessary. And that somebody is us. Stop trembling. It is important that you remember this. It is your second lesson. The Foundation does not rule the world. The Foundation serves the world. Do you understand what that means? Regardless of what the general population might think it wants, what we do, what the Foundation does, is in the overall best interests of that general population. Yes, I'm sure you did realize that already, but you haven't thought of the deeper implications. You've consoled yourself by thinking that all the torture and murder is for the greater good. This implies that there is a greater good, and a lesser good. It implies that there are multiple distinct goods, and that these can be quantified and compared. This is what we do on the Ethics Committee. We are the ones who balance the moral costs of everything the Foundation does. And in order to balance those costs, we must know those costs. Do you realize what that means, Doctor? It means that we know everything the Foundation does, has done, and will ever do. Everything that has ever been redacted or expunged, we know it. Every last detail. Yes, including what SCP-4472 does when it comes into contact with dead bodies. Yes, we know exactly what Procedure 110 Montauk is, too. We should. We're the ones who designed it. No, it's quite alright. It's a common reaction. Perhaps we shouldn't schedule these meetings directly after lunch, I suppose. Here, wipe your mouth. You will no longer be participating in active research. You may consider yourself a researcher at large, flitting from one project to another, from one site to another, at will. This is not a secret. You are welcome to tell all your friends that you have been transferred to the Ethics Committee, if you can deal with the jokes and the pity. You will observe what is done and ask the participants, and yourself, why it is being done. If at any point you feel that something is excessive or unnecessary or wrong, you inform us. We will summon the people involved in that meek, ineffectual way that your coworkers have mocked. And then, word will filter down from the O5s through the many levels of our bureaucracy. And those who are unethical will be given reprimands, which will be noted on their permanent record. Or their pay will be cut. Or they will be demoted. Or they will be transferred to another project. Or they will be shot for crimes against humanity. This is your third lesson. Remember it. The P stands for protect. The Foundation protects humanity from SCPs, and we protect the Foundation from itself. We judge what is and is not acceptable for the Foundation to do. We balance evils so that on the whole, and in the long run, evil is minimized. No, you don't have a choice about being on the committee. Yes, the irony is lovely, isn't it?